So for those of you who've been following the channel for quite some time, you probably know I'm not much a fan of turn-based RPGs. I usually love the cinematic quality and like the worlds of these types of games. It's just that I find the gameplay formula very like unappealing, you know, and I've always subscribed to the idea that I'd rather be part of the action than simply like just tell my characters commands. Although I do guess at a very high level, that's not really too detached from what video games are at their core. But in any case, you know, when I think of turn-based games, it's just usually the classic Pokemon games on Game Boy Color and Advance that I used to play as a kid. But since those days, I've kind of moved on, and it's for this reason that I really never got into like the Final Fantasy games, despite really liking how they looked until the more recent entries. But speaking on Final Fantasy, you know, don't be fooled. This game is called Lost Odyssey, and it was a new IP developed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, who, if I'm pronouncing his name right, was actually the original creator behind the Final Fantasy franchise. And this new IP was done in collaboration with Microsoft exclusively, and still to this day, it remains an Xbox 360 exclusive. There's no PC port, there's no current gen remaster at all. This is just one of those titles that is still stuck on original Xbox 360 hardware. However, thankfully, this is backwards compatible on the Series X, which is what you're watching right here. Now, despite my disdain for turn-based titles, I did my best to go into this game as open-minded as I can, because I had heard from fans for a long time, you know, that this is just one of the most memorable games of this type, and it harkens back to an era where Microsoft was just really trying to break the mold of appealing to Japanese gamers. And, you know, here's the thing. I just spent under 50 hours playing this entire game from start to, well, almost finish, but I'll get into that later. But yes, I've actually nearly completed this game, and it's a large one, so I was shocked at how much I was actually enjoying myself. In fact, it reminded me of really back when I had concern about when RGG Studios was changing the formula for the Yakuza franchise into being a more turn-based action fighter, you know, and I was just worried as a longtime fan of the beat-em-up style combat of that series that I was no longer going to be able to enjoy the new line Yakuza games. But after seeing how they handled Like a Dragon Yakuza, you know, just adding a bunch of flair of interaction between, you know, turn-based events and stuff like that, I ended up spending 70 hours nearly completing that game from start to finish, you know, doing everything, including the grinding tower missions and all that stuff. So when I was playing Lost Odyssey, it honestly felt like a very similar experience to that. You know, I was having a similar level of enjoyment, and, you know, the game here isn't as interactive as what RGG Studios had introduced in their formula, but still, you know, it requires time button inputs, and there's more than just standing around waiting for enemies to attack. You do have some light interaction. Now, this is a massive game. Lost Odyssey on Xbox 360 ships with 4 discs. Each game is divided up into these chapters, and as the story progresses, you'll be swapping, you know, these discs to get to different parts of the world. And it's just a game that has so much going on. Like, there's so much gameplay and stuff to do, and the amount of content is just simply staggering. Now, I didn't do any of the side content. I just tried my best to focus on the main story. Again, not really a fan of these types of games. I didn't want to kind of go crazy here. Sometimes I would run around and do some errand quests and just, you know, because they were kind of close. But for the most part, I just focused on the main narrative. The variety on display in this game is just simply astonishing, though. It really reminds you of Final Fantasy in terms of like the absolute scale of it, like how massive these worlds are, and especially the amount of varied locales and art styles that you'll be seeing. You won't be bored. You'll actually be finding yourself almost awestruck as you dip deeper into these worlds. And it's more akin to like the older RPGs of this style, where you have some kind of light exploration in these hub style levels, but generally you'll be traveling down one path and just kind of running into enemies along the way, which trigger these turn-based battles. All right, I hope you guys are ready to take a look at the Lost Odyssey box art, because there's a lot to delve into here. Anyway, here's the front cover of the game. I think it looks pretty good, you know, well, pretty standard, I guess, for games of this type. You know, it's nothing that you haven't seen before, but you got the only on Xbox 360 badge there. Nice look at the spine, and on the back, we got a bunch of different screenshots, just showing some epic artwork and stuff like that. Again, I really like the style of this whole box art and everything that they had going for it. You know, it was kind of setting a different tone, a different vibe, and just a different look for something that you would expect of a Microsoft game. So that's awesome. Anyway, here are the 4 discs, and yes, as you can see, there's quite a lot. I think the case that I have is not the original case that this game ships with, because I can't get all 4 discs to like feel locked in place. But yeah, you know, no kidding here. I do actually have all 4 discs. Now, I will say this, that if you're playing on Series X, you only need one of the discs. You do not need all 4 games to just install it to your hard drive. So if you get this game like used, or for whatever reason you lose maybe, you know, one of the, or a couple of like the 4 discs that you get with this game, you can still play it on Series X as long as you put in one of the discs. So that is nice to have, but you know, just for preservation purposes, I do like having all the discs here. It looks pretty nice. Now the manual here is just awesome, guys. This is full color. It's exactly what you would expect for games of this style. You know, they do a good job with this, the Japanese developers. All you want to know about the world is here, an incredible synopsis just setting you up for what you're about to experience with the story. There's character bios, there's a bit about the powers and weapons. I mean, really, it's obsessive detail. It's a Japanese game through and through, and they really just put an excellent amount of effort into all the art and just the contents of the packaging, and I was really happy when I got this. This is one of those games I'm just going to keep forever. So yeah, it's quite awesome. But wanted to make sure I showed it off here because you just get a lot with this. You know, no extra goodies, but just a solid package. And again, a game on 4 discs. This might be the first one besides Rage. I think Rage is like the other one I have that's also a 4 disc game, but this game's just so much more significant in terms of its size and scale. So anyway, I'm happy to show that here. Like I said, I really like what they put together here with the box and everything like that. I just need to find a case that's able to actually handle all these 4 discs safely, because yeah, that first one on top doesn't get locked in place well. Anyway, cool look at the Lost Odyssey box art. Now, the opening section to Lost Odyssey is one of the craziest and jaw-dropping sequences I think I have ever seen in a video game. The cinematography and just the choreographed action scenes on display are almost near Hollywood level, but it's what this game does with its first 5 minutes that just resulted in me being immediately pulled in and just never letting go. The game opens up with this beautiful CG cutscene. War is raging on, there's thousands of people on screen ready to battle it out, and then it zooms into our main character here, Kaim, alone with just a sword and some crazy powers. And the camera swings around, and all of a sudden a heads-up display appears, and you're playing, and what the actual fuck is going on? The transition from cutscene to gameplay in that sequence alone is barely noticeable, and it's here that the game sets the tone. In fact, it's here that the game makes a bold statement that this is next gen now. Now keep in mind, cutscene to gameplay transitions during this era are not prominent. You know, these days it's almost commonplace. In fact, many people just render all of their cutscenes in real time. But playing a game like this from this era, and coupled with the fact that I was playing through all the games in my collection in release date order up to this point, so I was used to, you know, playing games and seeing games having come out before this, you know, looking sort of still cross-gen-ish, but certainly, you know, the engines were still maturing and games were just starting to nail the look at what would cement this very generation. But Lost Odyssey here impresses from the very start. And I won't lie, someone like myself who had no interest in games of this style, it just immediately pulled me, and I wanted to be part of this world. I wanted to continue playing and to find out what other absurd things they were going to pull off with half a gig of RAM on a console. Visually, Lost Odyssey is a very good looking game. The character models in particular are really the real highlight here. Generally around this era, it was really only the PS3 exclusives, at least in my experience, that seemed to manage to get good looking character models here. But every character in this game is really unique. They're given emotions, and graphically the engine can really show this to full effect. Now the environments are good here as well. Perhaps they're not quite as pristine as some of the other lavish titles, but you know, this is a game with a controlled camera system, so you'll be looking at only exactly what the developers want you to look at. And the art direction is really what's going to steal the spotlight here every time, though. Again, so much really went into crafting this world. You'll have these jungle sections, these more futuristic areas, there's more rural areas, snow, caves, and all this stuff. I mean, some of this stuff can actually look kind of the same as you spend a little bit more time in it, but overall, I just found no issues with the way that this game looked, and I was fully immersed the entire way through. Now, for sound design, a similar amount of care has been put into that as well. Voice acting is really the highlight here, and it needs to be with games like this. You know, this has a lot of dialogue, a lot of story development, but every voice actor really lends a good job at playing their roles. The main character, Kaim, here is perhaps a bit more tropish to what you would expect for a hero for these styles of games. You know, he's pretty soft-spoken. He says things kind of clearly and simply. He doesn't really show a lot in the way of emotions, but there is a narrative reason behind that, and the story does give him some opportunities to break that mold a few times. But overall, I think everyone here plays their part exceptionally well. Now, music is pretty good here too. I still recall some of the tracks after playing through the game, although I'm not personally rushing out to buy the soundtrack, but I did enjoy it for what it's worth. So man, I didn't really have much expectations for Lost Odyssey. In fact, I was almost hoping that in the best case scenario, I would get over like 10 hours in this game before finally dropping it out of boredom and disinterest. Because it was just another turn-based style game. But guys, this is a great game. It takes that formula and really tries to do a bit more with it. And since it's not tied to a massive franchise like Final Fantasy, it doesn't need to overcomplicate itself or have the burden of trying to attract new players to its world and styles, of course, that have been in development for decades. Now, before I go, I said I almost completed this game, so, you know, why didn't I? Well, I'm actually on the final boss right now, but I think I hit a brick wall, and let me briefly explain here. I never grinded once when I played this game. I never went out of my way to beat enemies over and over and over again, and sometimes I would run around and try to skip battles just to get to like the main story and the main section, right? I admit that, although I was still having fun and I really liked this game, it's still turn-based and I didn't want to be stuck fighting like 3 turtles or whatever for 5 minutes. But I did make it all the way to the end. I'm on the final boss right now. I have items equipped and bonuses that make, you know, that give me an increase to power and my health stats, but I still can't beat this motherfucker, man. I spent 3 days literally trying to beat this one dude, this one final boss, and I just can't do it. Even in the matchups where I'm lucking out and I'm doing excessive damage, I still lose. Literally, the end is in sight, and I cannot complete this game. Honestly, I believe it's due to my disdain for grinding and trying my best to avoid the, you know, excessive combat scenarios that's basically resulted in me being just a bit too under level for the boss. And unfortunately, I also saved at this fight, and I have no other save files. Like, I don't like to have like this whole laundry list of save files. I like to keep things kind of tidy and clean. So I just, you know, had one save file throughout my entire experience, and I can't really, you know, go back as a result of that. So I'm just stuck. I'm like 99.9% of the way through the game, but I just can't beat this one guy. But regardless of this, you know, this is a game I very much still enjoyed playing, and I was really surprised by. It's just a shame that it's stuck on Xbox 360 hardware. You know, at least we have the backwards compatibility program on Series X, so you can still play it on modern systems, or at least the Xbox consoles. But I really hope we get someone like Night Dive Studios that will take this game and make it available on PC and current gen consoles. And, you know, just so you can play it on more modern hardware and that it's available for, you know, other people. But in any case, you know, these days you still need the disc. It's one of those games that I think a lot of people would actually enjoy, you know, even all these years later, but maybe they don't realize its impact or even that it exists. In fact, I'm sure there are a lot of people who were really young during this time, you know, who never got the chance to play this game or just really don't know it's around. So perhaps we'll see a remaster or some type of, you know, someone like Night Dive Studios being able to take this game, which has kind of been stuck on original hardware or on what platform, and give it life and give it availability to a lot of other people out there. But in any case, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I hope you guys enjoyed this reminiscing video. Lost Odyssey is fun. I highly recommend it. And other than that, I hope you guys have a very awesome day. Thank you very much for watching.